Podcast today is brought to you by Anchor. It is the easiest place to make a podcast, giving you everything you need in one place you can use from your phone or your computer. It has creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast and make it sound great. They'll also distribute your podcast for you. It can be heard in places like Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and many more. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. So download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
What's up, everybody? This is Brad with the Mature Minded Gamers. We are a group of adult gamers who have jobs and lives, but also several passions like board gaming, Star Trek, and much more. You can check out our website, maturemindedgamers.com, where you'll find links to our YouTube channel, Twitch streams, and all of our podcasts. Today, we're bringing you another episode of our Star Trek podcast where we cover all things Trek. What's up, everybody? This is Brad with the Mature Minded Gamers, and we are here for another exciting episode of Star Trek Discovery Season 1, and we'll be covering Episode 9 tonight. I've got my standard bridge crew with us, Eric and Will.
Hey. What is going on?
And we're going to jump right in. So, the beginning of this episode, we have Lorca being told that he has got to go back to Starbase 88, which is exactly the opposite of what he wants to do. So for what we know from Lorca so far, he is the fighter, not the runner. So he takes this opportunity to sort of go against the grain a bit and starts heading back to Starbase 88, but at warp instead of using the spore drive. Guys, did you catch that?
This is at least my third time watching this episode, and I just watched it today. And I did catch it. Now, if I caught it the first time when we watched it live, I'm not sure about that. But he quickly explains why, which I thought was great.
Yeah, thinking back to the first time I watched it, I don't know that I caught that. I think that he said, go to warp 5, and I was like, oh, all right. And then somebody mentioned something about the spore drive, and then he, goes through the whole spiel about Stamets, we're going to need a reason why we didn't use the spore drive. And I don't know. I thought that was really clever to give them time to figure out how to do what he wanted to do.
I had forgot how good this episode was. And
yeah.
I mean, right now, go ahead, continue with the summary. But there was a lot of little parts like that in this episode. I was like, oh, man.
Yeah. Well, I saw Will's light up a second there. Will, what did you have?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was very smart of him to give a excuse on, having to take a little bit longer to be able to get where they needed to go, where they were commanded to go. And I just thought it was a genius way. There's just those little things that I've noticed in the past 9 episodes, this one being the 9th, that just makes Lorca just stand out as just an amazing tactical genius. I mean, I know there are these little things. It's like, man, he's asinine, he's crazy, he's nuts, and all of a sudden it's like, man, he's pretty damn smart.
Yeah, he is quite the strategist. Well, so speaking of that, the rest of the crew kind of join on, and they put together this crazy plan to board the Klingon ship and install some transponders so that way they can see the location of the ship when it's cloaked. And they plan to use Discovery as the bait to sort of tease the Klingon ship out, allowing them to transport over to the Klingon ship while it's transitioning from cloak before the shields go up. Which this is one of those kind of neat moments where for people who aren't really initiated into Trek, it gives a good explanation about what's going on. But for those of us who have been involved with Trek for a long time, we know that that's sort of plagued the Klingon cloaking system through almost all of the different seasons. Like, they can't be cloaked, or they can't go from cloak to being shielded very smoothly. There's always that opportunity for something to happen there. So I enjoyed hearing about that. That was interesting. But we also learn that a part of this plan is going to require the Discovery to make 33 spore jumps in rapid succession to be able to scan the ship and to kind of penetrate that cloak. So I'm going to pause right here again because it wasn't more than a couple of episodes ago, and they couldn't jump from here to 100 feet down the road without running into problems. And now we're going to do 133 successive jumps.
There, you said it right. You said 33 the first time. I was going to try to correct you.
Oh, I did. Okay. Yep.
You got it right. You knew what you're talking about. So
yeah.
I noticed that too, but Stamets does mention that they are short. Like they're not jumping very far, so the calculations aren't as intense, obviously. And that's kind of what I pulled from that. That's why he was able to do that.
Yeah, but all of the stress that this has been putting on Stamets up until now, like, I don't know, man. That to me seemed really risky.
Well, I mean, we don't know the severity. I mean, and it was risky. You could tell they put a lot of emphasis on that. You know how dangerous this was, and like, you know, what a risk it was for him to do it, and like he wasn't going to do it. Remember? And then Lorca, man, sweet talked him into it with that. You know, I have more plan than just jumping. You know, after we win this war, we're going to make this. You know, we're going to find other dimensions and universes and stuff. Like he really laid it on smooth.
Well, I think that's actually what brings us to one of my favorite quotes for this episode was when Lorca was talking to Stamets, and he tells him that I know what drives you, Lieutenant. You're not just a scientist, you're an explorer. You could have stayed in a lab on Earth, but you chose to go where no one has gone before.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, that was a pretty sweet quote to kind of tie it back to the original series and Next Generation. So, yeah, I appreciated that too. And teasing alternate dimensions, is that maybe foreshadowing? ?
Well, right. And I mean, I know at the time we were wondering what was going on, but I don't think we had quite went that far with it. Where it goes.
Yeah, the first time I watched this, I did not. I mean, I caught that, and I caught that they were talking about alternate dimensions, and we won't spoil it quite yet, but the direction that the series headed was different than what I expected.
You've already spoiled it.
Well, okay. So let me ask you another thing. Did you guys notice that in this next scene, they were okay? Let me describe this a little bit. They're at warp 5, heading towards Starbase 88, and so they're traveling in one direction at warp 5. They go to black alert and they jump, and then when they end up at their destination, they're completely stationary. Now, I know that this isn't real, and I know that this is science fiction, but even from what I know from many other series, like going like I don't know, something about that didn't exactly that to me was probably one of the times in this episode that caused my eyebrows to sort of raise a little bit, because I don't know. I think I expected that this would be a prime spot for some techno babble to explain why that didn't break everyone's neck when they went from warp 5 to completely stationary like that.
It's funny you mentioned that because I caught it this watch through too, the exact same thing. And I was like, oh, they can just do black alert in mid warp and have no issues. It was a little wonky. I wish you would have dropped out of warp first just to settle my Trekness.
Okay, yep. But let me ask you this. So, I mean, you're going at a very high velocity, going from nothing to warp 1. I mean, what's the difference between, or even going at impulse? I mean, hell, is pretty quick. All of a sudden to all stop. I mean, that would break your neck. So, I mean, what's really the difference here? I'm not into the Star Trek lingity, so I don't know what the actual.
Sure. Well, so Starfleet ships are equipped with inertial dampeners, and that's supposed to be the feature that prevents your face from being splattered every time you go to anything, faster than thrusters. And so I did imagine that could be a thing, except that inertial dampeners really weren't as advanced even in the original series as they were in future episodes. So this to me just felt like one of those things where technology was just a little too advanced for a precursor to the original series. So I think that's the only thing that maybe made this stand out a little bit more, because even in the Next Generation, there were a lot of things that they couldn't do while they were at warp because of something could go wrong. They could get, knocked out of alignment, knocked out of the warp bubble. I mean, there was lots of things that could go wrong why they were at warp. That it was just too risky to do things, and for them to initiate a whole different type of propulsion while at warp and then coming to a standstill, I think that's what stood out to me.
Fair enough.
Yeah, go ahead.
That was beautiful. I couldn't have said it better myself. That's exactly how I thought too.
Well, sweet. I'm glad I'm not the only nerd on this podcast. So,
wait, I'm in the wrong channel.
All right, let's get back to it. So, now that we're completely stationary above Pavo again, Lorca dangles the Discovery as bait, and the Klingons bite. They decloak, and while they're decloaking, Burnham and Tyler beam over to the Klingon ship and get to work. Almost immediately, they get that first transponder planted, and it isn't long after that they detect another human life sign. So naturally, they go looking to figure out what that is. So I can't remember how long it took them to find him, but it didn't seem like it took them that long for a ship this size. But they find that human life sign, and it turns out to be Admiral What's-Her-Face, and she is piled up she's on top of a pile of dead Klingon bodies, but she is still alive. In this moment, Ash looks over and sees another live Klingon, and it's none other than L'Rell, whom we saw a little bit of. We got a glimpse of the fact that L'Rell was involved with Ash when he was imprisoned with the Klingons before, maybe a little bit of torture and whatnot. So he kind of hits a moment of PTSD, and he goes down like a sack of potatoes. He's just like unable to do anything at that moment. Burnham kind of reacts quickly and stuns L'Rell, puts her down, and has a quick conversation with the Admiral, who to me it seemed very obvious that the Admiral did not trust Burnham. And let's see, after that conversation, she takes off and plants that second sensor module. So it's like right before here, we're getting ready to go to the climax of this episode. Like, so far, what have you guys liked about this episode?
Classic Trek coming right at you here. We get the love affair from Stamets and the Doctor. What's his name? Anyways, we have that going on. Him doing something against the Doctor's wishes, and for the greater of Starfleet, he's going to do it. We see the classic captain breaking Starfleet's rules to do the right thing and save this civilization with the antenna. It just harps right back on a classic episode of Star Trek. I loved it. We get the adventure, the away team mission. We get everything. And then, I mean, you haven't even got to the sweet part yet, but this episode featured everything I wanted about Star Trek. And I think it really was an excellent mid-season finale, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I would totally agree with pretty much all that, except that it's not really a love affair between Hugh and Stamets, because they're married. So, do we know that at this point? Yeah, we do. We know that because they share they share quarters, and I'm pretty sure they've said something about them being married at this point. So, anyway, just pointing that out.
That's a good point. I guess we see more of them together. Like before, it's just here and there. I got a one-liner from Hugh, and I'm glad that we seen the full effect. How he was against it, how Stamets was lying, and then we also get Tilly being awesome. Injecting at the wrong time like she always does.
Oh yeah, like, oh, I'm so glad he told you about the side effects, and Hugh's like, what side effects?
Right. They just such a good job in this episode.
Yep. Will, do you have anything to chime in on before I go forward?
Nope. All in all, so far, I'm really digging this episode. This is I had missed this episode the first time I attempted to watch Discovery, and this is actually going back and rewatching it. This is actually the first time I saw this episode, and this really, I don't know what you guys did for when there was that lull between when the gap between season 1. I don't know what you guys did between them. Like, I had to watch the next episode. It wasn't an option. It was, okay, I'm starting the next one. So the fact that you guys had to sit through waiting blows my mind.
Yeah, we went crazy.
All kinds of speculation. I probably texted you
Yep.
30 times with different ideas of what
Yep.
I thought happened.
30 times a day. Yeah, it was
At
back
least.
and forth. It was pretty nuts. But
And one of those,
strap in, boys. We're about to show the Klingons what Discovery can do. So Stamets starts to do his thing. Starts to make that 133 jump sequence, and at each jump they're making their scans, and it's pretty obvious that it's taking a toll on Stamets. The Klingons are obviously perplexed as well. Like, I think Cole had it was either Cole or one of his cronies or something, like, was completely confused with what was going on. But Specialist Burnham at this moment steps up to the plate to run a distraction play against the Klingons, teasing herself to Cole as the one who killed Takuvma, and telling Cole that he doesn't have any honor because he's commanding this ship that he had no part in taking down. So I think that was kind of the linchpin there, that Cole couldn't help himself but to engage her at that point. So he takes the bait, and they kind of keep spatting back and forth. But in the same moment, we see that Ash is presented with like a life or death moment with Admiral Cromwell, and he pushes through his PTSD and his fear, and he begins to defend Admiral Cromwell. And kind of like continuing on with the adrenaline rush, we jump right back into Discovery, and it's finishing its 133rd jump, and the ship starts to crunch its data on what it needs to know to be able to get through the Klingon cloak. We snap back to Burnham, and she's dishing out a world of pain on the Klingon, who's dishing out his own world of pain onto Burnham, and it's at that moment that Discovery finishes its calculations, calls to beam back Ash and Burnham, and at first, when it beams back Ash Tyler, he tells Discovery that they're going to bring back Admiral Cromwell, and right as they're beginning to the transport process, Laurel jumps out and does almost like a chokehold or something on Ash, so she gets beamed along with him. And right after that, Burnham is they're just beginning the targeting sequence on Burnham, and she lands a really strong blow onto Cole, and at that same moment grabs Captain Georgiou's. They're not comm badges. What are they in this one? They're just insignias. So she grabs the insignia, and she's transported back to Discovery, and it's in that moment we all this kind of comes to conclusion. Discovery targets the Klingon ship and hits it with a bunch of photon torpedoes, destroying the Klingon ship. So, guys, I'm going to check in here with you real quick, because I know at the end of this one, even seeing this episode for probably the third or fourth time, the hair on my arms were standing up. I was on the edge of my seat. This was, I don't know, an awesome sequence. What did you guys think?
You nailed it. It was awesome. I mean, Cole decides that he's had enough of whatever Federation's doing. He's wanting to warp out. Burnham knows she can't let that happen, so she pulls a distraction, like you said. We get a great fight. It goes back and forth. And that fight ended fantastic with her grabbing that comm of what's her name?
Philippa Georgiou.
Yeah, Georgiou's. As a keepsake, I guess, or whatever. I think didn't she give it to Saru when he gets back on, or does she keep it? I can't.
She gave it to Saru.
Yep.
And so earlier we had seen when Burnham, kind of fought for her way to get onto the Klingon ship, like the captain, Lorca didn't want her to go, and she fought for it. And you seen a look of respect from Saru, they've been slowly mending their relationship since everything happened, and they hated each other for a little bit. Well, Saru hated her. And then I think that was just the final piece, to conclude that little mini story. I think they did a great job with it. I don't like the whole Klingon getting...
Quick editor's note. I cut a big piece of this conversation out right here because Eric started talking about details from a future episode that would have revealed too much. So if this seems a little wonky, just bear with us.
Yeah, I guess now that I think about it, when we first watched it, when we seen him having the issues, like why did it freak him out when he seen her? Why was he affected so badly? I mean, we'll find out later on why, but I don't really like the whole story arc very much. It's okay at the best. But yeah, like you said, the rest of it though was fantastic. The way that they handled blowing up the Klingon ship, how it all went down. Like even when Lorca turned around after he said fire the torpedoes, and he turns around, and then the ship just explodes in the background. Like that was well done. This is our generation's Trek. That right there was the moment. You would never seen that in Next Generation.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Eric, as far as like not really liking the whole Ash Tyler thing. I'm still kind of confused by why they had to do the surgery.
You just boned it too.
Another quick editor's note. Will then tried to talk about the exact same detail that I just cut out from Eric's audio, so yeah.
Oh. Well, my bad. I missed all that.
That's okay. Take 2.
All right, so I don't understand the whole I'm just being dick now. So one of the coolest things that I have ever seen in television is when the Discovery is basically displacing itself and using the spore drive to bounce all over and getting these 133 points of targeting and reference and all this other stuff for the Klingon ship and their cloak. And when I think about like teleporting and I think about like Nightcrawler from the X-Men, man, if I was Nightcrawler and I had that mutant ability, boy howdy, I'd be bouncing all around somebody, pop them in the face, teleport, pop them in the face, teleport. I mean, that'd be so awesome. And we actually get to see what I think a lot of people would want to do or would imagine doing if you had the ability to like just bounce around to different locations almost instantaneously or seemingly instantaneously. I just think it was absolutely awesome. And I think it was just some great TV viewing. I think it was really cool having Burnham on the ship itself, kind of getting her, I guess in a way, redeeming herself with the fight against Cole. And I thought that was really cool how she was able to get the comm badge back, or not a comm badge, but insignia badge or whatever it was back. I thought that was pretty awesome. I'm not liking how Ash Tyler ends up being like basically the Worf of this generation, getting his ass kicked every time he goes into somewhere, and is just whimpering down in the corner. I don't know. I mean, it's just maybe it's something with security officers. Maybe just security officers blow chunks and Star Trek in general. So it's this generation's red shirt. I'm not sure. I do like that we have the Admiral. I can't ever remember her first name though.
It's Admiral What's Her Face.
Cornwell.
Yep. Cornwell. Yeah, Eric's love. I do like that we get, we figured out a way to get Cornwell back. I think that was, I'm really digging her character so far. I'd like to know more about what kind of that, what's her name? The white Klingon. L'Rell and Cornwell, and that's a lot of L's, talked about when they were in the brig together. I'd like to know more, a little bit of details and behind the scenes kind of thing. It'd be oh my gosh, what is the name for Harry Mudd's bug?
Stewart.
I'd love to be a steward on that wall.
Oh, I see where you're going with that.
Aha. But anyway, yeah, all in all, this is just shaping up to be a great series, and I love it.
Well, so
not as good as Star Wars, but it's cool.
We're not done yet with this episode, and we'll address that little comment there later on. But this episode's starting to kind of wind down. We're kind of starting to tie off some of the storylines and kind of see some things fall out to fruition here. We get a moment where Lorca's told he's going to get a medal when he gets back to Starbase, wherever they're going. A medical transport has just dropped Cromwell off to another starbase to have surgery to heal from everything that happened to her. Ash and Michael have a touching moment together where Ash is able to tell her his entire story, his torture, his survival, how he made it through it all. And Michael shows him some compassion, which is something I think Ash needed desperately at this moment in the episode, along with a little bit of smoochy. So we see a little bit of development of that relationship. Stamets, on the other hand, he's not doing so well. I mean, he's kind of staring off into space at this moment. And I know when I watched through this the first time, like I was a little concerned for him. Now, I expected him to be a lot worse off than he was at this point because of some of the previous scenes after he's jumped significant distances or done things like that. Like I expected him to be a little bit worse for wear at this point, but so he seemed to be actually not all right, but just, I mean, he was on 2 feet and he wasn't sweating profusely. You know what I mean?
133 jumps, man. He should be dead.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. Like he should have at least be in sickbay at a minimum.
Or
anyway, at this point,
should have been in him.
Yeah.
Hugh, here's looking at you. Here's looking at Hugh, kid.
Okay.
Wow. That's from the Star Wars fan.
Yep. Episode title. So they have their conversation. Because of everything going on, Stamets offers to jump the ship back to Starbase. I think they're going to Starbase 46 this time or something like that. And Lorca in this moment sort of tells him, whoa, cowboy, like that's you've been jumping around like crazy. Maybe we'll just warp in this. I wouldn't ask you to do that. And Stamets almost insists that they're going to do it to give the ship and the crew like a much needed break. So after Stamets insists on that, he tells Lorca that this is going to be his last jump, his final jump ever. Like he needs Starfleet to study him, and he's not going to do any more spore jumps. And I didn't catch it the first handful of times. Lorca's definitely troubled by this, and I think now that I've seen what happens through the rest of the episode, I think it was a little more evident. But we set that aside for the second. So we go into the next scene here, and we get a glimpse inside of Ash Tyler's head, the frisky business that L'Rell was up to when he was in captivity. And it wakes him up, like it startles him and wakes him up, but it looks like it also wakes up something else inside of him, because the next step he goes to L'Rell to talk to her. And you can tell from the way that she is talking with him that there's something a little different here. Something is going on. She displays like genuine feelings for him more than just, captivity and torture and whatnot. So we then see this, or we hear in the background that the ship is getting ready to go to black alert again. Stamets readies himself for what we believe to be his final jump. And all seems like it's going to go pretty well and pretty uneventful. But this wouldn't be a mid-season finale if we didn't have a little bit of a cliffhanger. And so we see for the first time Lorca pull up a command that allows him to change the coordinates of where they're going to jump to. And he looks up with a little bit more of a conniving look in his eye than he has throughout the rest of the season. And as soon as they jump, something's gone wrong. Like it puts Stamets in an incredibly bad place. He screams out in pain. Once they finish their jump, the ship isn't very happy at all. It's got alarms going off like crazy, and it reports a bad jump. And they appear to be in a completely different piece of space than they were before, with wreckage all around. Saru says they can't figure out where they're at and that none of the star charts are matching up. And it's at that moment we fade to black. And that is where we get a long break before we get another episode. So what better place than now to stop to check in? Like, Will, Eric, when you got to this point in this episode, what was going through your mind?
So I want to take a moment real quick and talk about that control panel, because that was what was on my mind. The first time that I watched it, I noticed him pressing something, and then, the shit hits the fan right after that. And I'm like, surely he was just doing his normal command stuff. So I, being the diligent person that I am, rewind it. I got the power of that now. And I watch it again. And sure enough, it definitely seems like something fishy was going on. Now, I don't know if that's something that you guys caught when you guys were watching it, your guys' first way through. Did you notice that he did something there? Or like I didn't catch it at first, right?
Nope. I did not. I'm gonna totally admit to it. I saw it now. I didn't see it that time. Like I remember, like I think I called Eric at this point because, or Eric, was this the one that I came and watched with you? I don't remember. At this point, I was freaking out because I had no idea what was going on. I was imagining they were on a completely different part of the galaxy, and or some kind of time travel or something. Like it just was like I was sort of frustrated that we were going to have to wait, but sort of in anticipation as well. Like it was the perfect cliffhanger for the end of a season. But I guess all that to say, no, I didn't catch it, and I probably caught it on my second or third walkthrough.
I did catch it, and we were sitting together, Brad. And after we were talking about it, I said, "Well, Lorca did that," and then that sparked the discussion about it because I thought that's what he'd done, but it was hard to tell. It was just a quick shot of him messing with some control,
Right. And like I noticed him doing something, but it wasn't until I started watching, and I'm not going to talk about it, but the next episode that I was like, oh, that's spoiler. Sorry.
So here's the question, though, guys. At what point? So I think now, after watching obviously more of the season, all of the season, I think at this point it was when either Cornwall gets saved. You could tell he was not happy about that. He sent her to die because she didn't think he was mentally capable of leading, right? Remember that whole conversation?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's why she didn't trust what's her face? Gosh.
Michael Burnham.
She didn't trust Burnham when she first come to rescue him and was asking all those questions. Because I think at this point she knew, what had happened. And I think she's put it all together. And then you could tell when they tell Lorca that she's been rescued, he is not happy about it, I mean, he doesn't act angry, but he definitely doesn't act happy about it. And
Right.
then, so it was either at that point that he realized he needed to go back. Because I think up until this point, he was planning on staying where he was and making himself, there's no reason to go back to a universe where he is either already dead or wanted or whatever the situation is, So skipping ahead, I guess I should keep my mouth shut. Huh?
No,
So
I mean you're fine. Keep going.
So I don't know if it was that point when he knew Cornwall was going to rat him out that he wanted to jump, or if it was when, and this is what I think it might be more now I think about it. I'm saying it out loud. I think when Stamets said only one more jump, he was like, well, I got to do this now then. This is probably not going to work, but.
Yeah, but what did he do?
Well, yeah, exactly. What did he do? Next episode, we'll find out.
Next time on Dragon Ball Z. Oh, wait, wrong show.
It was just like you said, Brad. It was a fantastic mid-season cliffhanger. It would be a great season cliffhanger for any Trek series, in my opinion. I mean, this is top. This is right there. What do you mean, old dang? You don't think this is right there?
I'm old dang and no, because it would have. You're right. It would have been a perfect season-ending cliffhanger. Except I probably would have been like. I mean, we only had to go a handful of weeks in between this episode and the next one. If this would have been a season cliffhanger, I mean, that's upwards of a year of waiting for the next season to come out.
I mean, and look at the end of season 2, the cliffhanger we're at now. I mean, it's been terrible. I want season 3 so bad. But yeah, anyways, they did such a good job. They did such a good job.
All right, so tell me now, what is tell me about your highlights for this season. What's like your favorite scenes from everything up until this point?
I mean, I loved anything with both the Harry Mudd episodes. I thought were fantastic. Rainn Wilson did an excellent job. I liked learning about the crew. So the first 2 episodes, we didn't really know who the crew was going to be. I really like how they integrated them. Like we get half the crew from the Shinzu is now on board the Discovery, and we get, we didn't even know who our captain was going to be until episode 3 or 4. And we're like, well, how's Michael Burnham even fit into this situation? Now she's a prisoner, and they did a really good job of mixing that all in together, and it made sense. And I feel like there's a lot going on in this first half. I mean, and now we're getting to even more that's going to be happening. But they did a really good job of telling an excellent story that has a lot of twists and turns. And like Will mentioned earlier, it's a little confusing, like the Klingon side of stuff. And I totally agree. That stuff's confusing. I could have dealt with that being a little bit less, I guess. Like, it almost seems like a side part of the story. I mean, it's not, but it almost seems like it could have been, you know? They could have just focused on Monster of the Week for a couple episodes and took out all the Klingon stuff and you know, done something like that. But I guess then they wouldn't have had a main villain who killed their captain Shinzu. But, you know, whatever. Like, I think they could have definitely done that. And I think they kind of picked that up in the second half of the season, obviously, which we'll find out.
I think they did that a lot with the only 9 episodes. I mean, the fact that you had introduced, like you were talking about, Eric, two full episodes of not really even seeing the Discovery yet, and then only 7 episodes after that, and you're knee deep into the story with some real feel for these characters.
Yeah, they didn't do a lot of filler like you normally get, and so we got a lot of story and a lot of excitement, a lot of action, and not a lot of filler. Like, and I think that was what a lot of people were complaining about up to this point, if I remember correctly. You know, where's my Monster of the Week episodes? This isn't Trek. But
yeah, but you feel I don't miss that.
I don't either. I love storytelling. I think they did a great job, and that's why Discovery, like I said, is probably my favorite series. I mean, and you know what's weird is I remember after the first season, enjoying it greatly and liking it a lot, but not being my favorite season. But now watching it a second time, I don't know if I'm just picking up on stuff I missed, but I'm like, man, they did a really good job. Like, this first season, I didn't rate it as high as I probably would after watching it a second time.
I'm just glad we didn't have a holodeck episode. You know what I'm saying, Brad?
No, I don't know what you're saying, but I mean, I guess I would be, because if we had a holodeck so far, I'd be upset because we didn't have that in the original series.
I'm just saying, I hate holodeck episodes.
I know you do.
Episodes,
I know
Deanna Troy
you do.
episodes. You know,
I know you do. It'll be okay, Will.
Where's my Mandalorian?
Your Mandalorian. Well, so
boring. Know what I'm saying?
No, because that show was awesome too, and if we weren't focused on Star Trek, we'd be doing one of those podcasts as well. So, anyway, I forget what I was going to say. So this is a really awesome moment here that is going to get edited out. No one's ever going to hear this. Balls.
Shenanigans.
I'm going to mention one more thing. One of my non-highlights. I don't like the sport.
Wait. That's going to be my next question.
Oh.
So highlights for me on this season, like definitely seeing Harry Mudd and getting Rainn Wilson as Harry Mudd. The second episode, I think, was my favorite of the two. So I enjoy time loop episodes. Like, that's my favorite episode in things like Stargate, and some of them in Star Trek are pretty decent. There's a couple in Next Generation that one in particular that I really enjoyed. And then you know, this is probably one of my favorites as well. Other than that, like, I totally agree with this being a gripping sort of start to finish. Like, everything from episode 1 till now seems like it is just a constant sort of adrenaline rush from start to finish. And it's a stark contrast to what we were getting in Picard, which, you know, for anybody that's listened to, for all 4 of you that have listened to our podcast up until this point, like, you know that one of my biggest complaints about Picard is how slow it was moving, and how we got to episode 7 and it was like, what the heck are we even doing? Like, are we going to see some climax here? And in this series, it was like, holy crap, like, I need to take a break. Like, I need to breathe, because there's so much to absorb in this show. So very different storytelling between the two. So I really enjoyed that about this. And yeah, I don't know. As far as other highlights, I liked the storytelling that we didn't even see Discovery until the end of episode 2. Like, that to me was just nuts that would happen. You know, our showrunner, or our show leader, and Michael Burnham was somebody that came into Discovery being a prisoner. Like, I don't know, just stuff like that was so, to me, intriguing. It was just so cool. So anyway, Will, what did you think? I think I cut you off in there.
No, you didn't at all. As far as highlights go for myself, I think what has made me most excited about rewatching this is just the level of story that it has. In like you were saying earlier, Eric, with that short time frame, big story, small footprint, and it really epicness. I think they didn't skip on the graphics. I think they did an amazing job with how the show looks and feels. It sounds good. It looks good. That they chose amazing actors. Nobody is hokey. It just did an amazing job all around. With the whole production was just top notch. At first, when I didn't feel like I was going to ever have a connection with any of the characters, I think that the doctor, the engineer, Tilly. I think that Tilly is one of my favorites. Saru, another one of my favorites. I couldn't imagine the show without those actors and those characters. They're just everything about those two just to scream. And Stamets, oh my gosh, hated him at first. Absolutely hated him. And now, can't get enough of those characters, and I love it. I would watch this. I still can't say whether this is beating out something else as far as Next Generation or not, but I just think favorite overall one scene in this show would definitely have to be when they're using the spore drive, doing the 133 jumps, and how it's bouncing all over the place. That was amazing.
Yeah, cool. So, Eric, you kind of led into it, but my next question is, what are some of the lowlights or things that you didn't like about this first season? What didn't work?
Spore drive, change on the Klingons. That was my main complaints. It's not that I hated either one. I just wasn't a fan of it. Though I will say, knowing ahead of time, they did a good job of making me feel better about them. If that makes sense.
It does not. Tell me more about that.
Well, I mean, then we're getting into spoilers. How they wrap it up, how they explain the spore drive, why we've never heard of it, all that stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
And the Klingons too. So they get better. Like, the more you find out about what's going on, I guess. So, and that's not until, the second half of the season. Or do they even wrap that up? Maybe that's the beginning of season 2. Anyways, it's ahead.
So
All right.
part
Yeah, I was
that
gonna say,
I
Will, you
didn't.
jump in there.
Oh, go ahead, Brad. I'm sorry. I didn't mean
No,
to interrupt you.
I was just teeing you up, man. Go for it.
Well, I was going to say the thing that I didn't like was the whole Klingons. I wish they would have and not used and talked with less teeth, so you can actually understand what they're saying, even when they are speaking "quote unquote" English or basic or whatever it's called in Star Trek. Um, it was just so confusing to follow who the people were when I couldn't understand what they were saying. And then even when I was able to read along and follow along with what they were saying, then they jump between speaking in Klingon and then in English, and it was just really confusing. And then the character names, they didn't stay with any one character. I felt too long. The names weren't memorable enough, and that part just I didn't mind the spore drive. I thought it was cool. I didn't know how they were going to talk about it or bring it up in a Star Trek canon or whatever. But I thought I just hated the Klingons, what they did with that. I love the Klingons normally. Brad, what'd you think? Worst part?
So the Klingons are definitely one of my biggest complaints. Like, I didn't feel like we were in a position where we needed a Klingon redesign, and it was a really drastic redesign, knowing that getting into the original series there was such a dramatic difference in what the Klingons were. We already had some interesting storytelling as to why that was the case. It was pretty much Worf shutting it down in a DS9 episode, and I thought that was enough as a Trekkie, but I can understand why they needed to do something for those who are starting off with this. So I guess I'm excusing them a little bit for it, but you're right. Like, there was too much. I think the Klingons always sounded like they were talking with their mouths full in this episode or this season. Whereas even when they were speaking actual Klingon in any of the other series, it was more fluid and more dynamic. I mean, I even think of like in Search for Spock, when, one of the original series episodes, and you hear Christopher Lloyd speaking as a Klingon. He did it more naturally than anybody in this episode so far. So, or this season so far. So yeah, that was definitely a complaint of mine. The other thing, I'm going to stop short of saying that it didn't work, but just say that I was really concerned with, and I didn't quite get into the difference in technology between now and what we know is coming up in the original series. And that's really just me being a stickler. Like, I get it. Like, now we can do more CG and more realistic looking things now with the technology we have now that they didn't have back when the original series was being shot. But that doesn't mean that we need to erase canon. Like, it was one of the things that I think I would give credit to for Christopher Nolan and the Kelvin universe. Like that brought a whole new spin on what the Enterprise looked like inside, and it felt real, and it felt like technology was specific to where we would have been with Trek, like feeling more like a submarine and seeing these, and I'm talking of the newer Trek movies, but like seeing inside these ships as being these like industrial looking but clean, like masterpieces sort of thing, and they did it great there. But then we get into Discovery, and it seems like we've actually leapt forward with technology. Like, we're beyond where we were at the end of any of the newer seasons, even like Voyager. Like, I had a major complaint with the fact that here we are sitting on a technology that would have gotten Voyager home from deep in the Delta Quadrant, but it was never mentioned at all in Voyager. And again, I get it because of storytelling and all, but it just seemed weird that we were going to have such a critical mode of locomotion in this episode or in this series that wasn't going to be present in future things. So I don't know, the technology level, that was always a complaint to me, and it's going to continue to be a complaint for me and everything going forward, even up to current. But for reasons I won't go into here, some of that gets erased a little bit. So those are kind of my lowlights. I don't think it's enough to knock this off kilter. I still think that this series is full steam ahead. It's I'm not going to quite say that it's one of my favorites yet, because I mean, picking a favorite series of Star Trek is kind of like, picking your favorite child, which I don't have children, so I'm going to say DS9, but it's just, it's compelling.
I guess I don't have as much of a problem as you guys do in the Spore Drive. I think it's really cool. I mean, it's so dangerous that, nobody's going to inject themselves with the midichlorians or whatever they're called in this.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong, it's super cool. Like, I love the technology. I think it's great. Well, okay, let me take it back. I think the concept of it is great. I still think it's a little weird that we've got this network of fungi that's all around the galaxy, and it's what undergirds like reality or space versus subspace. That's kind of weird. But
dude, that's what George Lucas did to the Star Wars universe, midichlorians. That's what I was saying.
No, but we weren't like traveling around on midichlorians.
Well, no, but they took something that, everybody saw as in something that was meant more and had more meaning, and then all of a sudden it has an answer.
Yeah. Well, so my complaint is that I think that we started off with, hey, we're going to have this great way to travel from place to place without any time whatsoever. How can we write a solution to it? Instead of, hey, there's this really cool thing I want to do, and what's it, how are we going to develop it into a story? I don't know. But all that to say, though, the Spore technology was really cool. If this would have been a series after Voyager, probably wouldn't have had any problem with it.
Voyager was horrible anyway.
Shut up. Watch it again. Anyway, do you guys have anything else you wanted to talk about on this season up to this point?
Not me. I think you covered it all. We covered it all.
Awesome. Well, you want to take us out?
Sure thing. Thanks for listening to our podcast. Make sure you check out our website, maturemindedgamers.com. We do board games, video games, and much more. Make sure you hit that follow and subscribe button and have yourself a great day.